Welcome to the FCS Edge, where our hamstrings are glad we chose not to run the 40-yard dash. I'm Craig Haley of Stats Perform and theanalyst.com, along with producer Graham Bell. Happy NFL Draft Month. There's always a nice build-up to the annual spectacle that is the NFL Draft. And in January and early February, we have the major college all-star games. Late February, the NFL Combine arrives. Then it's the college pro days throughout March. And now we're on to the 3-day NFL Draft, April 23rd to the 25th in Pittsburgh. Each season, FCS football has about 200 former players on NFL rosters and practice squads. The number of draft picks has been decreasing from about 18 annually last decade to about 12 per year during the 2020s. But there are some really solid, good prospects whom NFL teams have studied up on this year from the FCS, a small but solid group. And that leads us to our guest today, an authority on the NFL Draft. He's Eric Galko, the Director of Football Operations and Player Personnel for the East-West Shrine Bowl, 101 years strong as the oldest all-star game. Eric's also the founder and president of Optimum Scouting, which offers analytical and predictive thoughts on the football industry. Eric, welcome to the FCS Edge, and thank you for your time today. You know the FCS so well. I mean, undergraduate degree at Delaware, law degree at Villanova. Just for a perspective, who were the standouts of those programs at that time?
When I was at Delaware, I had just missed the Joe Flacco era, but I was there for the Pat Devlin era. Remember that era as well, too. So it brought us to a national championship game. And then, being Delaware alum especially and working with the football team, actually talking to their current coaching staff and playing a very small role, but advocating for their current GM, Pat Calloway, who used to actually work with the Shrine Bowl myself for a minute at the Bowl, too. It's been awesome to see kind of Delaware. Obviously, they were promising back in 2010s we were going to be an FBS team soon. And then 15 years later, here we are, too. But it's been awesome to see the Delaware program grow as well, too. And obviously, Villanova's done a great job as well, too. But Delaware, that Joe Flacco, Pat Devlin era, we really felt we were part of something there for a while.
Yeah, those were great teams in Villanova as well. All right, let's get to this year. I mean, what are your overall impressions of this FCS draft class?
I love that there's still a good number of FCS guys that don't be drafted, but teams are going to kind of shape their offense or defense around a little bit too. And, I was talking to some players that, stayed at the FCS level or maybe transfer up as well too. And there's more pros and cons than people realize, I think, especially players, right? Every player thinks, and you can't blame them, hey, going from FCS to Ohio State or Texas Tech and getting a couple $1 million, like, you can't be too mad at these guys as well too. But you hear about the guys that stay, or even talking to a guy in next year's draft class who stayed at an FCS school, like the passion they have to build their program, be a part of it, is really impressive. And I know NFL teams are kind of going back to saying, you know what, guys that stay, we actually think there's some character aspects really appreciate with those guys as well too. So I think for that purposes, I hope more and more players, when the money is not going to be totally life-changing, want to stay at North Dakota State. I guess they're FBS now, South Dakota State, versus going to FBS for X amount of dollars as well, too. I think this draft class turned out to be a pretty strong one at the FCS level. I think there'll be more day two picks than people realize, but I think there's a lot more guys at the FCS level that'll contribute right away as rookies, which isn't always the case.
Sure. How much do players get a bump, whether they make that transfer, from FCS to FBS for a year or two? Is there a difference between the one-year guys who do it and the ones who do it earlier now and are there for a while?
I don't. And if I can, kind of megaphone this out to all the guys at the FCS level, like, talking to teams about Cole Wisniewski, like his time at North Dakota State comes up prominently, and it's a big part of who he is, and that's why he became a draft pick player. Texas Tech showed different things, and obviously Cole made a decision to go to Texas Tech, and it was a great decision. They almost won a national championship this year. It was awesome. Same thing for Mark Gronowski, like talking to scouts about him, like the South Dakota State time comes up in a big, big way, and that's who made him as a prospect. So I do hope that North Dakota State, South Dakota State, other schools where these guys kind of transfer up, that those schools take not credit, but have appreciation that, like, hey, these are the reasons why these guys became NFL draft prospects. And I think for the guys that leave after a year or two, it only affects them if they've changed who they are, right? I always tell players every year coming, when they stay in school next year, like, how do you get better? Like, NFL teams are going to play spot the difference. They don't picture game when you're a kid, right? There's this picture, this picture. This is your last year. This is your next year. If they can't spot the difference, you didn't get better as a player. NFL teams don't draft guys who are plateauing, right? They want guys who are ascending. You can ascend at the FCS level, but if you transfer, you don't get a bump just because you transfer. You don't get a bump because you stayed in school. You got to actually grow as a player. Or for some guys, and Cole is one of them, right? Cole goes to Texas Tech and he's playing a different role in that defense. He's learning different things. And now he's a versatile guy with the wealth of experience versus just a versatile guy in the same system in North Dakota State as well, too. So there's got to be a real purpose for transferring. And I think whether you're a 1 or 2 year guy coming from the FCS level, like, that's how NFL teams are going to really start with your evaluation, appreciate who you are.
That's a great point that we don't, gets overlooked at times. So thank you for making that. You mentioned, North Dakota State. I mean, the players this year that are going straight from Fargo to the NFL. I mean, they have some top ones, and Bryce Lance, wide receiver, Cole Payton, quarterback. Where do they fit into the overall class? Are they day 2 talents?
I think both guys have a chance. I would say Bryce is more likely. And the reason I think that in the end of the day, both of them may not be is not because of who they are as players. One, of Bryce Lance, it's a really top-heavy receiver class. There's a lot of different boards from teams. The top 15, 16 receivers, I didn't say the top 20 going team to team is wildly different, from different wide receiver ones to guys that are on some teams top 10 that aren't on other teams top 20. So being confident in Bryce Lance, I think Bryce is a special person and a player. I had a chance to talk to him all last year or so, talk to Coach Polsek about him quite a bit as well, and kind of knowing, obviously, his brother, and he's training in Dallas, and we're based in Dallas, so I got a chance to learn about that a little bit too, and hearing what kind of person he is, but also the immense talent he has. He's probably a little more fluid, explosive, but maybe not as dynamic talent-wise to Christian Watson, but similar type of, like, this guy can make an impact in the NFL for sure. It's a matter of how much and in what scheme. So I think he's got a real shot as well. And then I think Cole Payton, man, teams are split on kind of his NFL prognosis. Some teams see the efficiency this year, the athletic ability, the accuracy as a quarterback, and are like, rocket ship, this guy's a great quarterback. Other teams are 1-year starter. Some stuff on film is not going to translate. He might be a guy that needs a year or two to sit and develop a little bit because he's only a 1-year guy and still getting better. Some teams do have him as quarterback / tight end still, right? So I think he's kind of more all over the place. And I would say, like receiver, in general at quarterback, I think we're only going to see 3 quarterbacks go in the top 100 picks. So I think it's going to be very few quarterbacks in the top 3 rounds, maybe 1 or 2 more in the 4th, and then a dearth in the 5th and 6th and 7th.
Sure. Well, because NDSU has, really become the go-to school for the FCS level with the draft. I mean, 14 selections since 2014. The loss of them to the FBS level, how does that impact the way the NFL is going to look at the FCS level?
I think the biggest probably area it takes away is that it takes away a really good team to compete against, right? South Dakota State going against them was always a really great matchup for those two teams because those both were on, they're both high G5 level programs going at it. So you want to love the competition. That was a great one as well, too. Probably the biggest way I'd kind of extract it as well, too. But and probably a couple scouts saying, hey, maybe I won't go to the Dakotas because it used to be 2. Now I'll just go to 1 and otherwise. So I might be small things, but I think it won't be a huge impact. And I do hope that other FCS programs really emerge. And I think we've seen at the coaching level, basketball especially, but now in football as well, too. Like, good coaches are good coaches. And I hope that really good coaches opt to be head coach at the FCS level and win and be successful and lead programs, like the coach at Lehigh who went to Yale, who's a great young coach. Like, hey, just win at the FCS level and show college teams you can do that. I hope there's more and more developers of programs emerging at the FCS level because there's still a lot of talent that needs to be developed and organized. And as more and more FBS teams are focused on the portal and retention, there's not as much development going for the 2- and 1-star recruits that really have a lot of talent that the Dakotas, among many others, have developed over the years. So I'm optimistic that, hey, someone will kind of replace North Dakota State in some ways in being a powerhouse and having talent. But North Dakota State and what they've done the last 2 decades is remarkable. And I don't know how they've done it. I've asked Polsek, I've asked other coaches, I've asked Jens, like I've asked Jimmy Rogers at South Dakota State too. They're just like, hey, we just get the guys, develop them, have a process well too. So whatever they're doing up there, I hope it stays the same.
Sure. Well, because, the whole transfer era that we're in, and guys do leave the FCS earlier for the FBS, is there a concern that NFL teams, that is, they may just start to look at signing guys as undrafted free agent and not maybe even use a 7th round pick on an FCS player?
I think teams have become in general with the draft, because these guys are older, because they can stay in school longer, because a lot of these guys, when they have 4 years, are learning so many worldly things now about the portal and dealing with business dealings and a lot of the off the field and character stuff. I've told a lot of teams like, hey, really no excuse to mess up character anymore. I mean, these guys are professionals at 19 years old, legitimately. Like, if you can't find which guys are high character guys and not, it's kind of on you. And I think that's why NFL teams have more so been risk averse in the draft more recently and saying, hey, we can really easily not make big mistakes because these guys are developed players, developed people. And I think that's where maybe a risk averse mindset has kind of come around in the NFL, which I happen to agree with just based on what my philosophy would be as well. And that probably goes a little bit to, hey, the level of competition guys or the injury red flag guys, that, hey, these guys have something I got to kind of figure out, and maybe I'll just kick the can on those as well too. So I think we'll kind of see maybe a removal of kind of the middle class of FCS players, the top end guys, the Caleb Proctors, the Bryce Lances of the world. Like, they'll still go early because they're immense talents that kind of fell through the cracks at the FBS level. But I think the guys that are kind of those mid to late round picks, I think we could see, unfortunately, some teams say, you know what, like, I'll just take the SEC guy who's maybe a little bit less talented, but I saw it and has all this experience versus the FCS guy that probably deserves it. So I think there'll be some course correction, but I imagine in the short term, I don't think you're wrong, that we'll see a couple top 100 guys, a couple early day 3 guys, and those mid to late day 3 guys may fall out. And then hopefully teams realize that's a mistake and come back to it in a couple years as well too. It's all cyclical with these things.
Sure. Eric, over time, do you feel a certain position or positions translate better from the FCS to the NFL level?
Yeah, I think offensive line and DB are probably the two that jump out. And, I talk about this a lot with our staff and kind of tell people one of our core philosophies, one of my core philosophies is we have something we call creators versus preventer positions, where a creator position is your receivers and your edge rushers, where they could play 50 snaps in a game, have 45 awful snaps and 5 good ones, but that 5 good receiver snaps could be 5 touchdowns, right? Or 5 sacks as an edge rusher. Whereas if you're an offensive lineman or a corner, it's the opposite, right? You can have 45 great snaps, and as a left tackle, if you allow 5 sacks in a game, you're out of a job. Same thing for a corner. I think those positions require a lot more patience, a lot more development, a lot more focus. And I think the guys that are hungrier, that realize that their opportunities are small, their margins are smaller at the FCS level, I think those guys kind of develop perfection in ways that maybe are not the sexiest of athletic movements, but really, really efficient in what they're doing and very thoughtful what they are as well too. That's why North Dakota State having so many great linemen, part of that's because of the great history, but part of that's because, like, hey, I know that if I play well at North Dakota State, I can go to the NFL. And that desire for perfection plus people around them is really helpful as well too. So I think we've seen a good track record of FCS guys to the NFL at offensive line and corner. And I'm not sure that's a coincidence. Those positions really breed guys that have a chip on their shoulder, that are striving for perfection and are really focused on the little things that matter.
Sure. And having a chip on your shoulder, an FCS prospect or any sub FBS level prospect, do they face that stigma, being an inch too short or a second too slow? Do they have to do more to prove themselves?
I think in the pre-draft process, I think they do. And once they get to camp, it's kind of all over. And I think there's a balance between, I talked to a lot of people about this, especially at quarterback, but all positions. Like, a chip on your shoulder is a good thing, but you need to have self-confidence as well. And that's where I think some players at all levels of football, FCS included, they have that chip on their shoulder because they want to be the best. They want to be great. They've been doubted at some point. But if you don't also believe that you actually have that deep-rooted ability, like, that's where I think we see some really talented players, especially at the small school level, who kind of lack that self-confidence to turn like, hey, I can actually play at the FBS level. I just got to prove it. I can actually do that. I believe that. Those are the guys that make it. Those are the guys that have long careers in the NFL. I think North Dakota State, because they've had a history of those guys, has kind of bred that self-confidence that, like, hey, I'm not putting a chip on my shoulder just so I can, like, get out there and play a great game, but I actually believe that I can play in the NFL. I think the guys that have that at the FCS level can be successful, but I think it's a big secret of North Dakota State is that those guys can have that self-confidence because they churned out offensive linemen, NFL players on a yearly basis as well too. So I think that's probably a big discrepancy is do they have that self-confidence to do that? And that's where I think guys have the most success if they do.
Well, when scouts are looking at FCS players on film, I mean, is the evaluation process similar with NFL teams? Do they basically feel the same way about most prospects? Or does some teams really like a prospect so much more than other teams?
Yeah, it definitely happens well. And part of it's scheme, but part of it's just like I joke sometimes that like it's just people drafting people in a room, right? We have all this data, but in the day, it's a GM, it's a head coach, a couple scouts who are like, you know what? I just love Caleb Proctor, which some teams do. They're just like, this guy is just going to be awesome for us. And like, I don't care what other teams have him, what the media has him. Like, I just want to get this guy. And I'll give Les Snead credit. He drafted a guy, Kobe Turner, from the Shrine Bowl a couple years ago that wasn't a combine guy. And they might have taken him 2 rounds early, but they're like, you know what? Like, this guy's awesome, and we're not going to overthink this. And I think that's where NFL teams really kind of differ on boards. Part of it's scheme, part of it's risk tolerance and overall players, part of it's risk tolerance and injury and medical can differ between teams. Some teams are more okay with character stuff. Some teams are more averse to that as well, too. But I think a lot of it comes down to like, hey, did this player have a great interview and a couple great plays that this GM or director saw that they want to advocate for as well, too? And that's why the draft is random, because it's the whims of human beings who may change their mind this week. 3 before the draft, they may change their mind, like, you know what? I actually love Bryce Lance. I actually love Cole Payton. They could change their mind this week as well, too, and we have no way of knowing that as well, too.
We're talking to Eric Galko, the Director of Football Operations and Player Personnel for the East-West Shrine Bowl, also from Optimum Scouting. You mentioned Caleb Proctor, Southeastern Louisiana. Terrific year for the East-West Shrine Bowl with prospects from the FCS level, particularly the Southland Conference. You had the incarnate duo of Jalen Wathel, wide receiver, and Declan Williams at linebacker, Caleb Proctor. Southland Conference also has Charles Demings from Stephen F. Austin. He went to the Senior Bowl. How about this group for the Southland Conference? That's a strong group going into this draft.
Yeah, Deming's fantastic athlete, good person, good player as well, too. I think he'll have a little bit of adjustment to the NFL level, but I think he'll figure it out pretty quickly as well, too. He's long, but and Walthall is a guy that I think is a great chance to be a late round pick, because one thing a lot of FCS guys can sometimes lack is experience on special teams, like not as a returner, but as like a gunner or outside guy. But Walthall's done a little bit of that, but just his body type, his athletic ability, like teams are pretty confident he could be a guy that could be an ace on special teams, which as a receiver, like at a DB, like that's how you get picked on day 3, is being a guy that can play special teams tomorrow. So I think Walthall has a great chance, if not a very likely chance, to be drafted. But I'm Caleb Proctor. I mentioned him a couple of times earlier. I was hoping we talk about him a little bit, because he is very well liked by a good number of NFL teams. To my own surprise, well, to my happiness, he's my guy, Caleb, but like he is beloved by a lot of NFL teams. And I think it's whether it's the advanced data that we have at the combine or at his college school or some of the advanced stuff we have now in tools, like he is screaming to be that next Grady Jarrett. I don't want to say the name Aaron Donald, but Kobe Turner, like the undersized D tackle that is just like, put the numbers aside, this guy's going to have a huge impact. And just his twitch, his bend, his finishing ability. I always tell people on Caleb Proctor, FCS guys going against FBS schools, those games get heavily weighted, sometimes too much. But I still appreciate them, because Caleb Proctor wasn't a secret for LSU week 1, week 2. Like, they knew who he was. And they still couldn't stop him. He's the one guy, no offense to the rest of that defense, he was the one guy that they had to worry about. And he still had a sack, I think 2 sacks, a tackle for loss, like a bunch of pressures. You watch the film, like he's kind of always impacting the game, because they're doing double teams and having a running back stay inside just in case he gets through. Like, he impacted a whole game against LSU. They didn't win that game, but you watch that offense, and like that offense was uncomfortable with Caleb Proctor. That tells you a lot that, hey, when the moment's big and people are on him, he can be your feature pass rusher in the NFL D line room. And I'm getting overconfident maybe a little bit at this point in the draft, and I'm excited for my guy Caleb, but like going day 2 is a real possibility, and bordering on, like, I think it's probably more likely than not, just based off how teams are talking about him, how unique his skill set is in this draft class, and how valuable interior penetration is as well too. So all those guys in the Southland, I think, have a really good chance of being drafted. Demings, Walthall, maybe Declan late as a linebacker, but Caleb Proctor, I think, is the first one to go of that group.
Sure. Mark Gronowski, he was at the East-West Shrine Bowl. I mean, obviously a legend on the FCS level. He tied for the most wins ever, won the Walter Payton Award, 2 national titles at South Dakota State, spent a year at Iowa, 9 more wins there. So he finished with the most Division I wins for a starting quarterback, 58 in his career. He was there in the Shrine Bowl. Tell us about him.
Yeah, I mean, crazy has 58 wins. I bust Mark all the time that he's got to be like an 8-year player at this point. But he, I think that, again, I mentioned earlier, like his evaluation as a prospect is South Dakota State. And the Iowa is an added data point and a wrinkle for NFL teams to see him in a different offensive scheme, to an offense that probably didn't have as much offensive talent as he did South Dakota State, as crazy as that sounds, at least on the skill positions. Like those South Dakota State teams his last year with Hines and the brothers, like he had a lot of good players out there at South Dakota State. Iowa, maybe not as much besides Caden Wetchen. But I think what Mark's trust with NFL teams trust that Mark can be in their quarterback room. He's got a personality that he could be your starter. He could be your backup. He can fit in. He could be prepared to compete. Like he can kind of be an amoeba what your role is because he is really self-confident. Starting that many games in college, he should be. But NFL teams going back to a South Dakota State film and kind of remembering that, hey, the Iowa stuff was kind of a little bit wonky this year, but South Dakota State, like this guy came out and he was healthy after his last year at South Dakota State. He's getting drafted all day long and probably in the top 4 or 5 rounds. I always tell our scouts, NFL teams, like these guys don't get worse, right? They're the same guy. It's different situations. But if you liked him a year ago, maybe your things change a little bit on him, but you're going to like him again this year as well, too. So I think Mark's got a great chance to be drafted. And you mentioned the Shrine Bowl. He had I promise I'm not being hyperbolic, like one of the best all-star game quarterback sessions I've seen, Shrine Bowl, Senior Bowl, whenever. And I've been to a lot of them in my career. I've seen Russell Wilson, who had, I still think, the best all-star game week of practice I've ever seen, and back in whatever it was, 2011. But like Mark was top 5. Like it was incredible, layered throws down the field, managing an offense. Really, really impressive all week of practice. Had a great block in the game as a quarterback, which was awesome as well, to kind of show how tough he is as well. So, no, I think Mark is, despite being a major surprising combine step, I think he's a draft pick, and I think he's a guy that by year 2, year 3, an injury happens or something else happens, and he's starting games in the NFL.
Sure. You know, the way, college players have started to sit out bowl games and it's also happening in all-star games. How does an all-star game deal with that when a player just wants to practice and not actually play in a bowl game?
It's okay with me. I like these guys to play. It makes my life a little bit easier too, but that's what my job is, to make this work as well too. And I couldn't be more. One of my big ethos for the Shrine Bowl and me personally is want to be player first and player centric, right? I want guys to want to play in the game because they feel healthy, because it's worthwhile for them. And if they don't feel healthy or it's not worthwhile, having a guy play in the game because we need an extra safety and that guy gets hurt, like I wouldn't sleep at night, right? So our focus has always been on player health and well. It's our guiding ethos. And maybe sometimes we're a little bit too okay with these guys not playing in games and being so supportive of them. But I'd rather be too supportive than have an adversarial relationship with our guys as well too. So we deal with it. Thankfully, we're based in Dallas, Texas. You can walk outside of our practice facility and find 5 more NFL draft prospects nearby as well too. So we got guys that can come in and take advantage of the opportunity as well too. But it's a challenge, but it's not something I worry about or lose sleep over. I want our guys to leave the Shrine Bowl, to leave our experience and say, you know what, the Shrine Bowl took care of me. It was a great opportunity. That's a big reason why we've ascended from 29 draft picks the year before I took over to now being competing with, if not surpassing, as the top all-star game in the future here. So it's been a big part that's been taking care of players the right way.
Sure. A couple more questions, Eric. HBCU coaches, especially this decade, have been upset that there's not as many HBCU players drafted. Is that valid, or really has it worked out the way it should be when it comes to evaluating the talent level on the HBCU level?
Yeah, I think it's a mix of, there are some HBCU programs that do a fantastic job in taking care of players, developing their players. Chennis Berry, South Carolina State, who's been a good friend now. He's been at the Shrine Bowl as an assistant coach for the last 2 years. Like, fantastic coach, fantastic developer of talent, fantastic leader of players. And that's why South Carolina State has had NFL players and will have players, because they take care of their players in a great way. And Jared Washington from there, obviously, this year as well. He's got a great chance to be drafted too. I think it's a mix of, hey, you've got to, again, I go back to the Shrine Bowl ethos, you've got to make it worthwhile for players. You've got to have either facilities or a focus or a brand to do that. And I think that's where a lot of the FCS teams, HBCU or not, sometimes struggle. It's really hard to compete. It's hard to grow when you're losing players. Hey, I developed this guy, took care of me, still left me in a year or two, and I got to put on a straight face and be happy for you and good luck in the future. And now you're hurting our program as well too. So I think HBCU suffer the same thing that all FCS schools suffer, which is, hey, it's really hard to kind of keep building stability, because even when you do the right thing, sometimes these guys don't want to leave and go up, and you kind of have to put in a happy face on it, be happy for them, and be okay for the future as well too. So I know the NFL League Office, and I think NFL teams in general, are trying to find ways to give all FCS players, but including at HBCU schools, kind of more of a heightened experience, and there's ways they can kind of tweak that a little bit for the future. But I think NFL teams are not saying HBCU or FCS are not worth our time. But, the NFL is the ultimate meritocracy where you've got to be a great player to be drafted. There's no favors. There's nothing else happening, right? You've got to be a good player. And I think that's an important reward system, I think, for all FCS, all D2 schools and HBCU schools, especially. Like, need to say, hey, you know what? There's no crying in baseball. We got to keep moving forward and find great players and develop our guys and have these guys get drafted in the NFL.
Sure. When a scout looks at an FCS player on film, is there one trait that you look for first, you want to see stand out immediately when you look at that film?
I think one of the old tricks in the book, and I think it works pretty well sometimes, is you don't write down the play. You try to learn as little as possible the player before you start watching the film and just try to find the guy, right? And that was a Christian Watson thing for me. I remember watching North Dakota State film being like, I'll watch this Christian Watson guy. And I remember 4 snaps in, I was just like, I know who that is, and I'm not going to waste my time watching film. Like, we're going to invite this guy to the Shrine Bowl, obviously, right? It was like a very, I think I joke it's a 10-snap player. I'm like, I'm not wasting my time. This guy's incredible. And that's the kind of stuff you want to see as well. I think for NFL scouts with the FCS, you want to see a guy consistently impact the game and consistently play to play, series to series, different type of things. And at the FCS level, especially, you're going to get double team if you're a great player as a receiver or a defensive lineman or as a quarterback. That the standard's really high as well too. But the guys that do that consistently and win, and obviously there's athleticism traits you want to see and some technical development you want to see. You want to see guys that are experienced because you're kind of drafting on risk, having guys a lot of experience kind of de-risk those players a little bit as well too. But I think for me, it's hey, if I'm watching, there's a player, an FCS player, I'll say a couple of years ago, I won't name the player, who had a lot of preseason hype. I remember watching his film and I was like, I forgot he was out there for a series, 2 series, a quarter. And that guy went from a guy that had mid-round grades in the preseason to not in the NFL at all. And it's not rocket science time to be like, hey, you know what? Forget the hype. Turn this on at the FCS level. Caleb Proctor, you've got to be awesome most series and throughout the entire game. I've got to know you're playing a great game as well. And now those guys really rise to the cream of the crop at all levels, but especially the FCS level.
Eric, we talked to a few different, FCS prospects here in this draft. Anybody under the radar or somebody that you feel you have evaluated higher than other scouting sites?
Michael Wortham, Montana, a guy that we loved for a long time. NFL teams didn't really get on board till very late in the draft process. We invited him towards the end of the pre-Shrine Bowl process, but he was always a guy that we talked about and fought for, and we had a really good receiver room. I think almost all of our receivers we invited were combine invites, so we had a great receiver room, but we always can we get Wortham in yet as well too, and I think he's one of the best 3 or 4 returners in this draft easily. The testing athletically was really strong at his pro day, maybe not a 4.3 guy, but 4.4s, and the shuttles and the jumps were all really, really strong as well too, and he's still ascending as a former quarterback turned receiver. So again, as an FCS guy, you talk about that not plateauing, ascending with more opportunity, ascending as a guy who's still developing as a receiver, and a guy who has a real return ability trait right away too. I think he's got a great chance to be a returner. I think he's a better prospect than the guy Montana had a couple of years ago. Junior Bergen. I think he's a better overall prospect, maybe a slightly lesser return prospect if I had to stack him, but pretty close in terms of what I can do. And if Junior Bergen can be a draft pick, I think Wortham definitely can as well too. So he's a guy to watch out for late on day 3 to be a draft pick. And I love Wortham. He's a great kid, great player, had a great week at Shrine Bowl, and I'm really rooting for him.
Anything we didn't discuss today about the draft process or the Shrine Bowl that you would want to point out?
Proud of the Shrine Bowl this year and what our team did. We had a blizzard in Dallas, which was a lot to deal with during the week, but we still had a full week of practice and a full slate of games, and we're trending towards having our most draft picks ever for the 4th straight year, and really trying to be a great event as well too. But it's awesome every year. We've had an HBCU player, at least one every year I've been at the Shrine Bowl. We've had at least 4 FCS players everybody at the Shrine Bowl, sometimes many more than that as well too. And it's important for us to be stewards of this event because the Shrine Bowl's been around for 100 years, been around for 100 years after us as well too, to be stewards of this event, to really give players a chance from all levels of football to really impress NFL teams, to meet with NFL teams, and have NFL teams use us as a really important filter in their draft process. So I'm very thankful for the Shriners Hospital to let me be a part of this event too, and having it continue to grow is a great privilege. And again, highlighting small school players like you do, and hopefully our event does as well too, which I think really important for NFL teams and people in the media to know that every level of football has NFL players at it.
It sure does. Well, that wraps it up for the FCS Edge this month. We thank Eric Galko of the East-West Shrine Bowl and Optimum Scouting. We thank Graham Bell, our producer, and we especially thank all of our followers for watching or listening to the FCS Edge. We will be back next month with another episode. Thank you for joining the FCS Edge.